At an old ranch-style wildlife rehabilitation center, two wild bobcats began showing up at the front door day after day. They aren't aggressive. They aren't distressed. They are waiting silently, as if expecting something or someone. When the owner reviewed the security footage, she was stunned. This wasn't their first visit. These bobcats had traveled far, arriving at the exact same hour each night, holding their vigil until dawn. This was no coincidence. It was a message. Something had driven them back to this place. Something urgent, something intelligent, something she couldn't yet explain. Just as Margaret finally finds out why, she uncovers a desperate truth that defies everything she thought she knew about wild animals. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered deck of the Mountain View Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, a sprawling ranch nestled in the foothills of Colorado's Front Range. Margaret Thompson, a seasoned wildlife rehabilitator with 30 years of experience, stood frozen behind the kitchen window, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips. For the third consecutive morning, two bobcats sat perfectly still on her front porch, their distinctive tufted ears alert, their amber eyes fixed on the door with an intensity that made her heart race. The larger of the two, a mature female with a scarred left ear and a distinctive white patch on her chest, sat with the poise of a sentinel. Beside her, a younger bobcat, perhaps 18 months old, mirrored her posture with remarkable precision. They weren't aggressive or distressed. They simply waited, as if expecting something, or someone. Margaret set down her mug with trembling hands and reached for her phone to review the security footage from the previous nights. What she discovered sent a chill down her spine. The bobcats had been arriving each evening at sunset, maintaining their vigil through the night, and departing only when the morning traffic on the distant highway increased. The pattern had been consistent for 5 days now. As she studied the grainy footage more closely, focusing on the older female's distinctive markings, a memory stirred. A memory that made her sink into the nearest chair. "Luna," she whispered, recognizing the scarred ear, the result of a brutal trap injury she had personally treated 14 months ago. Luna had arrived at the center in devastating condition. A local rancher, Tom Bradley, had found her caught in an illegal leg-hold trap on the border of his property, her left hind leg severely damaged, her body emaciated from days of struggle. The trap had been set by poachers targeting bobcats for their pelts, a practice that had been increasing in the area despite law enforcement efforts. Margaret remembered the long nights she'd spent monitoring Luna's recovery, administering antibiotics, cleaning wounds, and slowly earning the wild cat's wary tolerance. But what had complicated Luna's rehabilitation was a discovery made during her initial veterinary examination. She was pregnant. Margaret had faced a difficult decision: intervene medically and risk the pregnancy, or allow nature to take its course while providing supportive care. She chose the latter, transforming a section of the rehabilitation center into a specialized birthing den, complete with cameras for remote monitoring to minimize human contact. Luna had given birth to 3 kittens on a cold February night. Margaret watched through the monitors as the exhausted mother cleaned each tiny mewing form, her rough tongue working with infinite gentleness. But joy turned to sorrow when, over the following days, it became clear that only 2 of the kittens were thriving. The smallest, a female, failed to nurse properly despite Luna's persistent efforts. Margaret made the heart-wrenching decision to intervene, but it was too late. The kitten passed away on its 4th day of life. The surviving siblings, a male and a female, grew strong under Luna's care. Margaret maintained strict protocols, ensuring minimal human contact to preserve their wild instincts. Food was delivered through a specially designed chute, and cleaning was done only when absolutely necessary, always while the cats were secured in an adjacent enclosure. The goal was always the same: return them to the wild where they belonged. By late spring, Luna's leg had healed remarkably well, though she would always carry a slight limp. The veterinarian cleared her for release, but the kittens, at barely 3 months old, were far too young to survive in the wild. Margaret faced another agonizing decision: separate the family or keep Luna in captivity longer than medically necessary. After consulting with colleagues and reviewing scientific literature on bobcat behavior, Margaret made the choice to release Luna. Studies suggested that bobcats, being naturally solitary except during mating and rearing, would adapt to separation. The kittens would remain at the center until they reached appropriate release age, learning crucial hunting skills through enrichment activities and live prey training. The day of Luna's release had been bittersweet. Margaret and her assistant, Jake Morrison, transported her to a carefully selected location near Beaver Creek, an area with abundant prey, water sources, and minimal human activity. As the carrier door opened, Luna had hesitated, looking back once with those penetrating amber eyes before disappearing into the underbrush. Margaret had wondered then if she would ever see the magnificent creature again. The kittens, meanwhile, thrived in the center's care. Margaret watched them develop distinct personalities. The male, whom the staff privately called Brave, though they were careful not to become attached, was bold and curious, always the first to investigate new enrichment items. The female, Shadow, was more cautious, observant, often learning by watching her brother's successes and mistakes. As autumn approached and the kittens reached 8 months old, the age when wild bobcats typically separate from their mothers, Margaret began preparing for their release. However, an unexpected obstacle arose in the form of William Hartley, the previous owner of the land where the rehabilitation center operated. Hartley, a conservative rancher in his 70s, had sold the property to the Wildlife Foundation 5 years earlier, but retained certain land use rights and significant influence over decisions affecting the surrounding area. When Margaret filed the release paperwork, indicating her intention to return the young bobcats to the Beaver Creek area, Luna's territory, Hartley objected vehemently. "Those cats are nothing but trouble," he had argued during a tense meeting at the center. "My nephew runs cattle on the adjacent land. You release more predators out there and we'll have problems. Mark my words." Margaret had spent weeks negotiating with Hartley, presenting scientific data about bobcat behavior, their preference for wild prey over livestock, and the ecological importance of maintaining healthy predator populations. She brought in experts from Colorado parks and wildlife, arranged meetings with Hartley's nephew, Robert, and even offered to personally monitor the released cats with GPS collars. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Robert Hartley, unlike his uncle, proved receptive to Margaret's arguments. A younger man with a degree in agricultural science, Robert understood the balance between ranching and wildlife conservation. He had seen firsthand how the reduction in predator populations had led to an explosion of rabbits and rodents that damaged his pastures. "Uncle Will," Robert had said during a family dinner that Margaret later heard about, "Mrs. Thompson's right. We've lost more money to rodent damage than we ever did to predators. Besides, bobcats aren't after cattle. They want the cottontails that are eating our grass down to nothing." It took 3 more weeks of discussions, compromises, and legal documentation, but eventually, William Hartley relented. The agreement included provisions for compensation if any livestock were lost to predation, though Margaret knew this was unlikely. regular monitoring of the released animals, and a commitment from the rehabilitation center to respond immediately to any concerns. Now, standing in her kitchen and staring at the security footage, Margaret understood with crystal clarity why Luna had returned. The younger bobcat beside her, it had to be Shadow. The cautious female kit, now grown but still bearing the delicate features that had distinguished her as a juvenile. But where was Brave? Margaret spent the next hours reviewing records, making calls, and piecing together reports from local wildlife cameras and hiking trail observations. What she discovered made her throat tighten with emotion. Several hikers had reported seeing a young male bobcat with an injured foreleg near Beaver Creek 3 weeks ago. The injury appeared consistent with another illegal trap. Tom Bradley, the same rancher who had found Luna, had called Parks and Wildlife about finding blood and fur at another trap site, though the trap itself was gone and no animal was found. The poachers were still active, still targeting bobcats despite increased patrols and surveillance. Margaret's hands shook as she prepared specialized equipment: a have-a-heart trap, medical supplies, tracking gear. She called Jake, who arrived within the hour, and together they formulated a plan. If Luna had somehow communicated with Shadow, if the siblings had reunited in the wild only to face another crisis with Brave injured or worse, then Luna's appearance at the center was nothing short of a desperate plea for help. That evening, instead of leaving when the highway traffic increased, Luna and Shadow remained on the porch. Margaret, moving slowly and deliberately, stepped outside with Jake. Luna's scarred ear twitched, but she didn't retreat. The magnificent cat stood, stretched, and began walking toward the trail that led into the forest behind the center. She paused, looked back, her amber eyes meeting Margaret's. "She wants us to follow," Jake whispered, awe evident in his voice. For 2 hours, Margaret and Jake tracked the bobcats through increasingly difficult terrain. Luna moved with purpose despite her old injury, Shadow staying close to her mother's flank. The sun was setting when they reached a small cave formation Margaret recognized. It was less than a mile from where Luna had been originally released. The smell hit them first: infection, fear, and something else that made Margaret's stomach clench. Inside the cave, barely visible in the fading light, lay Brave. The young male bobcat was alive but severely weakened, his right foreleg swollen and infected from what appeared to be a wire snare injury. He had managed to break free, but the wire had cut deep, and infection had set in. Margaret's training kicked in immediately. While Jake kept watch and documented everything for Parks and Wildlife, she administered a sedative via pole syringe, working with the practiced efficiency that came from 3 decades of experience. Luna and Shadow watched from a nearby boulder, their bodies tense but trusting. The transport back to the center was accomplished in darkness, with Brave secured in a carrier and Luna and Shadow following at a distance. Margaret worked through the night, cleaning and debriding the wound, administering antibiotics and fluids. The damage was severe but not irreparable. Brave would keep his leg, though like his mother, he would carry scars and a slight limp for life. For 3 weeks, Brave recovered in the same enclosure where he had spent his early months. Luna and Shadow took up residence in the surrounding forest, appearing each evening at the center's edge like guardian spirits. Margaret left supplemental food at the forest line, understanding that the family was maintaining their bond despite the physical separation. The day Brave was cleared for release marked a turning point not just for the Bobcat family, but for the entire community. William Hartley himself attended, accompanied by Robert and Tom Bradley. Local news covered the story, and donations poured in for anti-poaching efforts. The image of Luna waiting at the door had been captured by security cameras and became a symbol of the intelligence and family bonds of wild animals. As Margaret opened the carrier door in the same spot where Luna had been released over a year ago, she watched Brave tentatively step out, his leg healed but cautious. Luna appeared from the underbrush with Shadow, and the reunion that followed defied every scientific paper Margaret had read about bobcat behavior. Luna approached her son slowly, their noses touching in a gentle greeting. She examined his healing leg with sniffs and gentle nudges. Shadow, typically cautious, bounded forward and rubbed against her brother with an affection that spoke of deep relief. The three cats circled each other, their bodies relaxed, tails occasionally touching in what could only be described as joy. Tom Bradley, the tough old rancher who had found Luna in that first terrible trap, wiped his eyes without shame. "Never thought I'd see anything like this," he said quietly. "Makes you think differently about these creatures." William Hartley, stubborn and set in his ways, watched in silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice gruff but sincere. "Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology, and them." He gestured to the Bobcats. "An apology, too. Robert's been trying to tell me for years that we need to coexist better with the wildlife. I see now what he means." In the months that followed, the Bobcat family established a territory that overlapped with the rehabilitation center's land and the surrounding wilderness. Trail cameras captured them hunting together, sharing kills, and maintaining bonds that conventional wisdom said shouldn't exist. Luna, despite being well past the typical dispersal age for her offspring, had created a new model of Bobcat family structure, perhaps born from trauma and survival, but no less valid for its uniqueness. The poaching problem didn't disappear overnight, but the community's response strengthened considerably. Tom Bradley organized rancher patrols. William Hartley funded new surveillance equipment. Robert started an education program for local schools about wildlife conservation. The story of Luna's return, her plea for help, and the family's reunion became legend in the area. Margaret continued her work at the rehabilitation center, but Luna's story changed her approach. She began documenting unusual behaviors more carefully, questioning assumptions about wildlife family bonds, and advocating for release strategies that considered emotional connections, not just biological imperatives. On quiet mornings, when the sun painted the mountains gold and the world felt still and perfect, Margaret would sometimes see them. Three shapes moving through the tall grass, hunting together, surviving together. Luna, the mother who refused to abandon her children. Shadow, the careful daughter who found her courage. And Brave, the son whose survival depended on a connection science said shouldn't exist. The security camera that had captured Luna's patient vigil remained active, though now it recorded different scenes. Occasional visits from the family, always at a respectful distance, no longer seeking help, but perhaps acknowledging the bridge between two worlds that had been built through trust, compassion, and the recognition that love exists in many forms, even in the wild heart of a bobcat mother who knew exactly where to turn when her child needed help. In the end, the story of Luna and her kittens became more than just a tale of wildlife rehabilitation. It became a testament to the intelligence and emotional depth of wild animals, the importance of community and conservation efforts, and the profound truth that sometimes the best science is simply listening to what the animals themselves are trying to tell us. The family thrived in their territory, free and wild, yet forever connected to the humans who had understood that sometimes the greatest act of conservation is simply opening a door when a mother comes knocking, asking for help to save her child.